Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Today, we're talking about is fermented foods or fermenting for everyone. Now, what I'm going to say right off the bat that might surprise you is no. And I'm sure T will appreciate this one because I know how T feels about fermented foods. It's twofold, really. Not everybody likes the flavor of fermented foods, and I don't blame them. I do with most things. Patrick doesn't like any of it that I know of. He doesn't like yogurt. He does not, he can't get past the smell of kimchi, so he doesn't like that. Obviously there's things that have like vinegar used in them, and that's fine. But yeah, mostly he doesn't like that kind of stuff. He does like my homemade wine. We don't drink it very, very much, but every now and then we might enjoy just a little bit. Like we had a little bit with our Passover meal. So just like maybe a shot of the homemade wine. Usually most people can find a certain type of fermented food that they do like. We look at fermented foods as being, well, for one, it's a way that you can preserve foods. And two, well, these aren't necessarily order of importance. That's going to depend on the person. But the other reason is because of how beneficial they are to gut health. But you don't have to eat fermented food or always eat fermented food to be able to consume things that are beneficial to your gut health. So that is why I knew I was forgetting something. I had meant to include the link to the herbs and more for digestive health. And this isn't that, it's not all about fermented foods. It's just about herbs that will help, such as like feverfew and peppermint and ginger, things like that. There's a lot you can do to help your gut health that doesn't involve having to eat sourdough or make sourdough or eat ferments, drink ferments, and having to make them all the time. While I do like some fermented foods, I love kimchi, I love fermented eggs, I love yogurt and my homemade sodas, which is just a very lightly fermented drink, very lightly fermented. Just enough, just a few days, enough for it to get real fizzy. I do really like that. And there's a few other things I enjoy. But I don't like eating and drinking fermented foods all the time. And here's my second point. Even if you love fermented foods, it still might not be for you because some people can't tolerate it. It actually can have the reverse effect on their digestive health, believe it or not. So what happens is, and I was curious about this because I find if I eat a lot of fermented foods, too much back to back, that my stomach sometimes, it's not that I get nauseous. I don't know really how to explain it. It just doesn't feel right. And so I know when I've had too much. And so I listen to that. I pay attention to that. So Linda says, love the ferments I grew up with, like kraut and pickles. I'm not a big fan of milk-based ferments, fishy things, or soy products. Yeah, soy products especially, right? I will touch on a few different types of ferments, but mostly so people can sort of look into, if they're trying to get into it, just things that they can try if you haven't already. Now, I do love yogurt. And sometimes I'll make my own, but a lot of times I'll purchase it. And here's why. For us to get a good, healthy, organic milk, especially to get raw, which is near impossible if you're talking cow's milk, well, even goat's milk out here. And for what it costs us to buy that milk, it really doesn't save me much money to buy that milk and then make the yogurt myself. I still do it from time to time, and I do have a video on making your own homemade yogurt. My current favorite yogurt is this one. Now, I've tried Nancy's organic yogurt before, and I liked it. But I noticed this now that with Azure Standard, now that we have a delivery, a drop point, I'm able to try things like I was talking about in my other show, like trying meats and stuff that I wasn't able to try before. And I had not seen that I've never seen the grass fed organic, and then vanilla flavor without, I don't think it has any added sugar. It doesn't taste sweet at all. No, it doesn't. Oh, wait, no, it does. It has some cane sugar. It's just very, very lightly sweetened, and it's not one of the first ingredients. I'll be getting more of that, and I'll probably try going ahead and making some some yogurt out of that just to see how that turns out based off of that. But at any rate, there's nothing wrong with buying your own, buying the yogurt and not having to make it yourself if you can find a good quality brand like the Nancy's Organic. There's others out there, but so far this one's my favorite of all the ones I've tried. Now, and I like to mix it with like some homemade, like blackberry jam or some other kind of berry jam that I've made. Jace absolutely loves it. Just put a little scoop of that in there and mix it up. Oh my gosh. I can't get him to stop eating it if I do that. But all my grandbabies love yogurt anyway, so that works out pretty good. There was something else I was want to say. Let me come back before I go through the list of some other ferments and things that even if you don't like fermented foods, you could still consider making for yourself because of its many benefits in other ways, not just for your digestive health. But I just want to remind everyone that just like with anything else, no one should ever assume that just because right now it's the latest, greatest, biggest thing and everybody's pushing this or they're pushing this specific saying, oh, this is the only culture you should use to make yogurt is the best. It's the number one. You know what's the best? What's the best is what works best for you. Why I say that all the time, right? And what we constantly see in society, constantly, it doesn't matter if it's a gadget or a health claim or whatever, they all may be very, very beneficial. And different people might be very happy with how this gadget worked for whatever it is they're using it for, or how this particular ferment made them feel, or this particular herb, or taking vitamin D3, how much it helped their health. I have no problem believing that this stuff has done, wonders for a lot of people. However, that doesn't mean that is what you have to or should do. So when people go around and start preaching at people like you should take, X amount of the vitamin D3, someone's trying to push that on you. Like, this is how much you should take. This is what I take and it's best. That's what I read in a book. It does not mean it's right for you. The vitamin D3 is the same thing. You've heard me say this a lot if you followed me for any amount of time, that all the wonders of vitamin D3 and making sure you're taking it, that it's done for this person over here, can actually have an opposite effect on you or on somebody else. So like, if you're taking high doses of vitamin D3 because you've been experiencing some hair loss, but now your hair loss is getting worse and you're losing more and more, that means you don't need that D3, because too much D3 can cause hair loss. Not for most people, it's going to help with hair loss, but not everyone. So the same thing applies to your fermented foods. The same thing applies to your gadgets. Some people love their freeze dryer. Some people wish they would have never invested in one. Some of us choose not to bother investing in one. And it's all going to be individual per person. So no matter how much people are preaching at you about this, that, and the other thing and what you should do, this is why I get so irritated when people tell me you should, even those that mean it in the nicest way. I have to bite my tongue because I know they mean well. And and reply with grace. Try the stuff. Sure. Try these things. Well, you might not want to go out and buy an expensive freeze dryer. I don't have freeze dryer. I have dehydrators. You might want to not want to go out and buy an expensive freeze dryer just to try it. What you want to do in that case is you want to try freeze dried foods from somebody else first and see if you like them and see if it's going to be worth it. And then listen to the reviews, not just those people who have a product to sell because they got one for free and they have an affiliate link that they make a commission off of, but to those who like the stories I've shared and even pinned to the top of some in the comment section under some videos, the stories that people have shared about how they bought a freeze dryer and how they had headache after headache after headache despite all the money they spent on that, and then it cost them that much more again. Well, maybe not that much more again, I'm exaggerating, but cost them a lot more to get it repaired, to ship it back to the company, or the company now just sends them, tells them, we'll fix it yourself. And so then they have to do the work themselves, even though they're not, electricians and mechanics and whatever else. So, it's all of this stuff. So if you think you need D3, try it. If you start having issues, stop taking it. Same goes with your fermented foods. If you start having digestive health, you start having rashes because fermented foods can cause some people to have reactions that cause them to have rashes. Then you probably need to stop or find a different type of fermented food. It could be the food. Some people just can't handle dairy at all. So that would mean things like milk, kefir, yogurt, and the like is not going to work for them. And so they have to find something else. They might prefer sauerkraut or kimchi over those things and not have an issue with it. But again, they may just flat out hate it. And they probably don't even like sourdough either. I like sourdough from time to time. I don't like it all the time. And I don't like to always make it. I'll make it basically once in a great while, but it's not something I like to do all the time or make all the time or enjoy eating all the time. So that doesn't make me wrong and the person who only makes sourdough right. It doesn't make them wrong either. It means you got to find what's going to work best for you. Now, here's the nice thing about sourdough, I will say, or like using my fermentation starter to make a bread, like a sourdough type bread, is that you don't have to rely on dry yeast. It does take longer and can be a little more work intensive, but at least you can always make a leavened bread without having to have dry yeast. And so that is the nice thing. Kimchi was the very first food I ever fermented, ever, because I really wanted to try it. And so I thought, well, the only way I'm going to finally get to try it is to just make it myself. And my oldest son and I fell in love with it right away. In fact, I used to eat it for breakfast on a lot of days and lunch and dinner. I find I can't handle eating it that often anymore, like I did back in I was in my 30s, I think. So I really want to bring that up and kind of cover that. So don't ever feel guilty if fermented foods of any kind are not your thing. Don't feel guilty about it. There are other options that you can do for your health. It doesn't all have to always be around fermented foods. You'll have people that's all they eat, and you'll have people that don't eat any, and then you'll have people like me that are somewhere in the middle that they do like some now and then, but I don't ferment everything and don't like to eat it all the time. Now, let me go ahead and cover a few other fermented foods. This is mostly going to be things I have made or do make. Like I said, the yogurt occasionally. For a while, I was doing water kefir. Some people might like water kefir who don't like fermented food. And that's in both the water and the milk use what they call grains, but they're not a grain. They're just like these little, they seem like little silicone globs, but they are different from each other, the water and the milk. They're both considered kefir, but they're different. So I don't believe that they're interchangeable. If anyone knows anything more about that, I seems like I read they're not years ago that they're not interchangeable. But I've done both. The water kefir, it was okay. I played around with it. I did several videos on it and tried making different types of kefir, and it was fine. I like my own homemade, using my fermentation starter for a fizzy drink over that, or over the kombucha, which I've done off and on. I started probably, I think the first I ever made it was maybe 30 years ago. I did it for a few weeks or so, and decided, nah, not for me. But I have my own fermented soda, and sometimes I'll do a fermented fruit smoothie. If I got a lot of fruit coming in from the garden of various kinds. In fact, I have a video in that fermenting playlist I have a couple of different fermented fruit smoothie videos in there. But I think the most recent one is where I had a lot of really ripe apples. They weren't rotten, they were just really ripe, and I was trying to use them up. So I made some 3 different flavors of fermented fruit smoothie with those. You can do something like that if you're just fermenting it for a few days where it gets fizzy. It's not gonna have that sour flavor that a lot of people don't like when it comes to certain fermented fruits and vegetables. It's actually can be quite good. But again, it's how much of it you can handle. I find that I can be very sensitive to that, so I can only handle, just like, even my homemade wine, I can only handle just a tiny bit at a time. So you got that, I said your sauerkraut, kimchi, any vegetables, can just be fermenting carrots, fermenting snow peas. I'll probably do that again this year. Just ferment some snow peas, throw in some onions and garlic and some red pepper flakes to make them spicy. Let's see, I mentioned the eggs, hard boiled eggs. Again, you'll find that in there. But I have to say, my newest hard boiled egg, fermented video, I accidentally cut out the part where I add water, where I top the jar off with water, and people can, I show me adding the fermentation starter and other things, but somehow I accidentally cut off the part where I topped off the jar with water. Make sure you top that off with water once you got your starter and all that stuff in there. I do like sometimes fermenting garlic and onions just by themselves so that I have them in a more fresh form to use in foods rather than a dehydrated form. If it's something, it just depends on what I'm using them in. If I'm wanting to do a stir fry and I don't want to use dehydrated onions, I'll throw those in. Or if I don't, and that's if I don't have any fresh onions to use, at least I've got it fermented. So it's a way for me to preserve them in a more fresh form. Not my favorite, but because it does kind of mellow out the flavor of the onions and the garlic. It can, for those who want a more mellow flavor, they might prefer that. But you're not gonna end up with so much of that fermented flavor. So some people who don't like fermented foods might not mind that so much, but if you're cooking it, you're still not gonna get all the benefits of the fermented, the live active cultures and all that, bacteria and stuff in there. Because, a lot of it's gonna get killed in the cooking process. So I mentioned the milk kefir. Now, the nice thing about milk kefir is that it can be used if you don't like to drink it, which I did a little bit here and there. I'm not much of a milk drinker myself, so wouldn't say it was my favorite thing. So the nice thing about that is even if you don't like to drink it, you can use, just like with yogurt, you can use your milk kefir in replacement of buttermilk to make like your ranch dressing or anything you're going to use buttermilk in, baking with, like buttermilk biscuits and pancakes. You can use your milk kefir in that. Again, you're going to be cooking that stuff, so it's hard to say how much of the beneficial bacteria you're getting, but you're getting that flavor that you get like from buttermilk or whatever that gets added to the ranch dressing and so on. Now, if I was going to recommend one thing that everyone should at least try, that is making vinegar. That is a fermented food. And the thing is usually everybody has some kind of use for vinegar. And it's so easy to make it yourself out of just about anything. Right now, I've got my lemon balm vinegar, and I've got the dandelion, camellia, and violet vinegar going. And the lemon balm, my intention is to use that as a cleaning vinegar. But if I really like the taste of it when it's all done, I might use that for a cooking, marinating, whatever vinegar. And then the other one I'm making is a hair wash vinegar. So the thing is even if you don't like fermented foods, you can still make vinegar and use your vinegars for all kinds of things, including making your own medicinal extracts if you can't have alcohol at all. So I typically prefer using my homemade wine to make most of my herbal extracts. I will use vodka if I'm making a tincture that involves more woody items, such as, the turkey tail mushrooms, cinnamon, elderberries aren't a woody item, but I still do a tincture with those. But I mix it with the cloves and the ginger and that kind of stuff. Even if it's not something you're going to consume straight to help with your digestion, you can still learn how to make vinegar, and then you can use it for cleaning. You can use it for washing your hair. You can use it for making medicinal extracts and so much more. So I do recommend, if you're, leery about fermented foods, at least try that. At least get started with the vinegar. Super easy. You can even just throw it in your, use a half cup to a cup of homemade vinegar as a replacement for laundry detergent. Though I do have my own homemade laundry detergent powder that I make, just out of 3 ingredients: baking soda, washing soda, so sodium bicarbonate, sodium carbonate, and salt, whatever cheap salt you have. It's very easy, but sometimes I'll also throw in some vinegar. But I have done a load of laundry or two using only vinegar, homemade vinegar in the wash, just like I add it in there, just like you would a liquid laundry detergent. It's fermented foods for everyone. So again, the answer is no, it's not. Most people can benefit from it, but it doesn't mean that you have to eat fermented foods, and it doesn't mean it's for you. So thank you to everyone for being here, for always coming in and supporting me, for being so kind and loving and generous of your time with me. I appreciate that. I know, especially this time of year, you're all busy. You're all trying to squeeze in a little bit here and there. I get it. I totally understand it. So that makes me appreciate it even more. Again, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.